Good afternoon. How's everyone doing? Hi, I'm Juan Carlos Reyes. I'm Executive Director for Diversity, Community Affairs, and Equity here at TC in the Office of the Vice President for Diversity and Community Affairs. I am very thrilled and honored to be welcoming you and welcoming an esteemed group of panelists, colleagues, friends, who will be speaking to you very candidly about their careers and experiences. So I'm very excited to be a part of this and more grateful to you for participating in today's event. We always start this program by giving a very brief history. I promise not to bore you. But this is one of those events that reminds us that community work is done with the entire community. So many years ago, Student Senate came to the office. This is way before my time. And they had an idea to have a program that promoted doctoral education for Black and Latino students at the time, and increasing the presence of Black and Latino students. And that grew into diversity in the academy and diversity in Doc education, to what it is now, which is a series that supports both master's students who may be thinking about doctoral education, but also supporting doctoral students that are currently navigating the journey and maybe thinking about something else, maybe having difficulties along the journey. So it's really designed to help students manage the pitfalls, manage their individual journey, and also reflect with panelists and sometimes previous students that have walked their journeys. So this program in specific is designed to help students think broadly about the doctoral track. So whether you're a master's student and you haven't decided to commit to a doctoral program and you may be thinking, well, that professoriate thing, not quite my thing. I don't see myself up there, right? This is for you to really think about the degree in a way that maybe you may not be thinking about it. Or maybe you're already a doc student and you thought you were going to the professoriate route and you're like, now I'm stuck. I'm 3 years in. What do? I don't want to do this anymore. This is for you as well. So that's what today's conversation is intended to be. It will be organic. There will be a moderated panel discussion. And then we hope to leave some time for Q&A for you as well. For our members who are attendees who are attending virtually, we want you to be engaged as well. Please feel free to use the chat as you go along, and we will monitor that go through your questions as much as we can. Lastly, just a disclosure, the event is being recorded. We received many inquiries from students who were unable to make it today, but we will record it. We'll post it through various newsletters, GSLD, ODCA, etc. All right, so without further ado, I get the honor of introducing the panel, and then we'll hand it over to them. So I'll start with Dr. Sabeen Sheikh. Sabeen is the director of TC Next. So we have your TC Next director. She's here with that hat, but also with the hat of someone who has gone through a doctoral program. So she's director of TC Next here at TC. She's working in student affairs, career services, and higher education for over 10 years. She has an EDD in educational policy and leadership, and a master's degree in mental health counseling. Sabeen's work spans over career and student development in higher education and addressing mental health issues in various communities. Her experience includes work in strength-based counseling, career coaching, social justice, domestic violence, undoing racism, and student leadership development. Sabeen is also a lecturer in higher education administration program for the School of Professional Development at Stony Brook University, and has previously taught in Hofstra University's College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. She currently serves on the founding board of grassroots nonprofit Heal Collective New York, and is a certified youth mental health first aid instructor with the National Council of Behavioral Health and American Muslim Health Professionals. So, superstar Sabeen, we're very happy to have you here. So the next person, Dr. Brennan DuBose, dear friend of the office, TC alum. Happy to have Brennan back in this capacity. So Brennan DuBose is the creator and host of the Blackstage podcast and an accomplished executive with a diverse background in academia, corporate leadership, and philanthropy. With over 10 years of experience, he has led with both passion and strategic thinking towards making a positive impact, a demonstrated commitment to excellence in the creation of meaningful change. Most recently, he was Vice President of Learning Development at Two Stigma, a global financial services company based in New York City. Before that, he led global talent engagement and served as portfolio managing at Echoing Green, overseeing its Black Male Achievement Fellowship. Echoing Green's Black Male Achievement Fellowship invested more than $6 million to sufficiently support and scale the work of leaders whose organization emphasize creating deep and lasting positive change for Black men and boys in the United States. While at TC, he focused both his research and professional efforts centering on building and implementing inclusive workforce development programs and pipelines that highlighted staff, students, and the surrounding community. Brennan holds a doctorate and 2 degrees from Columbia TC, political science, and an undergrad in political science from Howard University. He served on the board of several nonprofits, including the Maryland Center at Bowie State University and B360 Baltimore. In 2020, he was named top 30 under 30 of HBCU graduates by HBCU Buzz, and he currently resides in Brooklyn. So give it up for Brennan. And next, this is where the tables turn, and this is where this actually it's important for this conversation because this is all about networking and mentorship. Laura happens to be one of my mentors who has guided me through so many stages in my career, my life, and today I get to present her. So I'm very pleased to have her share her experience or depth of experience with you as well. So Laura Scheiber describes herself as a comfortably situated with 1 foot in academia and 1 foot in nonprofit social innovation world. She received her Ph.D. from TC in comparative education in 2012. Upon graduation, she worked at TC as an innovation fellow through the Ed Lab, a former think tank focused on how technology is reshaping learning and education. Followed up with a postdoctoral fellowship at the Pontificia Universidade Católica de Minas Gerais, PUC Minas in Brazil. And I think I lost the rest of her bio, but there it goes. After returning to NYC, she served as director of the New Media Arts program at an award-winning youth media organization that teaches young people how to make documentaries and websites on special issues of relevance to them. She currently is a CUNY Adjunct assistant professor at Kingsborough Community College. Her research projects have centered around inequities in education systems, really inspiring nonprofit organizations dedicated to youth empowerment, technology, and equity in higher education, and fostering critical digital literacy. When she is not nerding out, she is likely traveling the world and fostering, get this, fostering dogs 40 and counting, or how hiking in Vermont. So please join me in welcoming my dear friend and mentor. So with that, I now pass along the program to Sabeen, who will lead us through the moderator discussion and manage the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Awesome. I would love to hear from both of you what your doctoral journey was like, and some kind of tidbits from your doctoral journey.
Let's see. Is there I was like, where do we all begin? Anybody have challenges that is in the doctoral program? You're doing great. It's perfect. You're right on track. Let's see. So I started my doctoral studies in 2006. I was in the comparative education program. And I knew that I loved travel and I knew I was passionate about education, but I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And we were talking earlier that one of the challenges is actually narrowing in. It took so long to figure out what do I actually want to focus on because there were so many things I was excited about. The end of the day, I ended up doing my research on looking at leaders of nonprofit organizations in Brazil, and there were nonprofits that were doing really innovative, exciting work that empower young people that live in high conflict areas. So kids that were living in high violence areas what were some nonprofits that were really doing innovative, meaningful work in social entrepreneurship and equity green. It ended up being an amazing project and I loved it. I was very fortunate to have an amazing advisor who was just offered a lot of advice and really walked me through how to get fellowships in order to make sure my doctoral work could be finished. I'm not the greatest writer. It's not my strength. That was very anxiety provoking. Certification exams, extremely anxiety provoking. I always had this sense of, am I actually going to get through this or am I going to fail? Like constantly. If I could go back and give my 2006-year-old self advice, I think I would have loved to have been told that everything is always working out. Even when it feels like it's not working out, things are always working out. And other advice, or the other part that I think allowed me to get to the finish line, it was not an easy journey. I graduated in 2012. I straddled sociology and comparative ed, but I think what got me to the finish line, which is really about community, is my advisor had us get into learning communities where we would get together. There would be 4 of us that were working on our dissertation, get together, and each of us had to share out a chapter we were working on, give advice to each other. And then I had a writing accountability buddy where we would literally set our clock and say, okay, we're gonna write from 9 to 12, this is what we want to get done, and then check in with each other at the end of that 12, and it's just an accountability buddy. Because doing it on my own, I would still be here with one Carlos.
That wouldn't be so bad.
Yeah, that would be awesome, so, yeah, that's.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
All right, in back, can you hear me? Okay.
No, use the mic.
Use the mic? Okay, can you both hear me? All right, cool. So hi, so I would say it's so interesting to hear about like people's doctoral journeys because everyone had their own individualized experience, right? There's not a one size fits all experience to doctoral work. There are like certain steps that you have to take in order to complete your doctoral journey that everyone has to, do, but everyone's experience is very specific. And so I started here at TC in 2013. I got started my doctoral program in the fall of 2014. My department was English education and I did a concentration policy. So with EPSA here. And so I had a privilege to be here in a moment of time where there were a lot of different conversations happening, especially around diversity and inclusion. There were conversations around the killing of unarmed Black people, especially at the time. And I think, it was fascinating to kind of like find myself in classrooms that were talking about all of these experiences that directly impacted me, right? And so we're talking about Trayvon Martin, but like I very much so identify in some of the experiences that could have hurt my life, right? That so many other families have had to face. And so with that, I was fascinated with really the intersection between media constructed narratives and Black boys. And what I know to be true is that there's a subject matter expert for everything. You want to look up the expertise around underwater basket weaving on the coast of Australia. There is an expert there that knows exactly what to talk about and how to explain it. But for me, I was really fascinated with having conversations with individuals about their own experience and using the privilege that is being at an Ivy League institution to provide those platforms and those stories. And so I began to have conversations with Black boys who lived in the Bronx, who attended a public school in the Bronx. And that began my Sunday ritual of having these conversations in a Harlem coffee shop with these kids and just hearing their perspective, hearing their expertise, hearing their journeys. And I was really fascinated because New York is such a diverse place, right? And so you can have 4 Black young men who identify as being Black, but have parents who come from the Dominican Republic, who have parents who come from Africa, who have parents who were the descendants of slaves from America, who journeyed through America, right? And like all of them having their own perspective of how they want their lives to play out, how they feel the world looks at them. And in real time, I'm growing with them, right? Just as much as they think that I'm teaching them, they're teaching me, right? And what I found was that, like, although I always knew that I wasn't going to be a traditional academic, I think that we are all learners of life, right? We're always constantly moving through the world and we're learning and growing with life. And my grandmother used to say, my grandmother was born in 1921, and she would always say, you don't stop learning until your last breath. And I believe that, right? And so with that, I felt like, okay, well, this is a moment in time where I'm going to be learning, I'm going to be growing, and I'm going to get as much as I can out of this experience as I can. That was a little bit of my doctoral journey.
Well, thank you both for sharing. Mine was slightly different than both of theirs. I was working full-time at the time in the nonprofit sector, and I knew I wanted to get a doctoral degree. As a brown Muslim woman, I knew that I was going to hit a lot of glass ceilings, and I had a master's of mental health at the time. And when I made the jump from my job in the nonprofit sector back into higher education, I did that very strategically. I knew that the school that I was going to work at Hofstra was going to pay for a huge part of my degree. And that financial piece was very important to me. And so I worked in career services, so I knew how to navigate kind of the application process, but where I kind of was stumped was my dissertation topic, right? And for any of the master's students that are thinking about applying, pick something that you're very passionate about. You get a lot of students in our office that are not sure what to do research on. Don't do research on something that you're not passionate about, right? I could have very easily done something in career services because I've been there for roughly 10 years. But I feel the topic very close to home. So my dissertation and my research is on reporting behaviors in campus culture on Muslim college students and how they deal with microaggressions and discrimination and why they don't report. And so that as my life as like a Muslim student navigating as a first gen, daughter of immigrants, that research is very close to home for me. And a lot of my advisors would tell me, don't make a lot of big changes in your life. I mean, I was working full time at the time. I switched jobs twice and I moved twice. And I still somehow had no social life, but I ended up graduating, right? So it is possible if you all are like, wait, 4 to 6 years, that's a lot of time. If you have a timeline for yourself, even if sometimes faculty members are like, well, take a step back a little bit, take time. I was like, no, cannot financially. Look, when I left my job, I had to pay for it. I needed to finish and I had to drag my faculty over the finish line, right? So sometimes it's the opposite that happens. Folks are not dragging you, you're dragging them towards the finish line. So my journey was slightly different than both of yours were. So my first question here is, when did you start your job search? And what is some insight that you had as you were kind of navigating where to start working? Was it during your doctoral program? Was it after? Kind of that journey for you all?
Sure. So it's interesting. Again, I think back in my life and I think about like what some of the things were told to me, and they say like, you graduate from undergrad and you get your dream job immediately, right? And I graduated from undergrad and I couldn't get a job, right? And so I realized that, as much as I had tried to get a job, it was not happening. But I knew two things. I knew that I wanted to go to grad school and I knew that I wanted to live in New York. And so because of that, I took that leap of faith, applied to TC, only graduate school I applied to, was luckily got in. And that was kind of like the beginning of trying to figure it out. Right. And I think that for me, I had to just continuously be honest with everyone. It's like, I was trying to figure it out my first year here because I wasn't quite sure of what I was going to do. Right. I was someone who was like, oh, do I go the law route? Right. Do I go the entrepreneurial route? Whatever that may be. Do I go the political route? Right. What is that specific thing that I should be doing? But at the same time, I think that I had really great mentors and I had really great sponsors. And so I can get on a little bit about that right now, as far as like, how important that was. When I coming to this school was very intimidating for me. I'm someone who has a big family, a lot of friends, and came from a very warm situation back in Maryland. And to come to New York was like, whoa, like this is a lot. It's not like the movies. And And for me, it was who can I talk to, who can give me direction in how to kind of move through this space? Who can help me figure it out, because I need it desperately. And the first person who I was able to really latch onto was Janice Robinson, who was the vice president of this office. That's why I'm here today. I came up to New York and I said, "Hi, my name is Brennan, and I'm trying to figure things out." She's like, let's talk, right? And she talked to me for an hour, right? And just saying, like, these are the things that you need to think about. These are the things that you need to be considering. I then started to meet professors who were like, "I see something in you," things that I didn't even see in myself. And I began to say, okay, it's okay to have a fascination in this. It's okay to want to focus and lean in this way. And that was the beginning of saying, like, okay, well, maybe there's a philanthropic trajectory here. Maybe there is, you know, some type of like entrepreneurial trajectory here, but I'm not quite sure yet. And I don't necessarily have the confidence yet to lean completely in, but I need a job, right? And so luckily, I was able to work at Columbia. I was able to work at Columbia for 6 years and really kind of build my skills in a magnificent way, because, you know, this is before hybrid, this is before virtual. I was here before 9 and I would leave at 11, right? Because my classes were as such that like it just was, that was my entire day, that was my entire life. But because Columbia was so familial, they would allow me to intern. It would let me say, okay, you take the middle of the day and you go to your internship downtown. You want to teach a class? Okay, we'll work your schedule out so we can kind of figure that out for you, so you can do everything that you want to do. And so what I say by that is you want to be in an environment that will nurture everything that you're trying to do, right? If you're not getting the nurturement and you're not getting the support and you're not getting the sponsorship, you're never going to be able to reach the heights that you're looking to have in your career, period. And I'll stop there.
So I just want to plus one, two things that have been so far said so far. 1+1 on her dissertation or research work, going with your passion. It's a long journey, and I did this. I had 2 options. Went with my passion. So happy, so happy. So I highly recommend that. And +1 on thinking. I keep going back to. So I was very fortunate. And talking about community and mentors, I was very lucky that when I graduated, I had amazing advisors at my dissertation committee, and 2 of them opened up job opportunities, both at Teachers College. I ended up I started working as an innovation fellow at this really fun think tank that was all about how is technology fundamentally shaping the way we learn, the way we think, education. And it was a blast. So I went that route. So I was very lucky. But 2 things that I also just want to +1 is thinking about the community. I mean, we live in a network society. And so really being mindful of tapping into your network, but not just any network, really thinking, if I could tell my 2012 self, what do you want to do when you grow up? Well, actually, I think I would step back and think carefully about, well, what are my values? What's important to me? What's fulfilling? What feels stressful? Because there was a lot of the doctoral program that was just stressful. It doesn't have to be that way. Or, once I made parole from the doctoral, all the hoops, I think that 2012 advice I'd give myself is, what are the values that are most important to you? Who are the people you want to surround yourself by that inspire and that can lift you up, and that you feel you can create something with? That's what and I think my other 2012 self, there's a book out there that called Designing Your Life that which is using design thinking principles to think deeply about using data about your own life to walk you through, like, okay, what excites me, what actually fulfills me, and where do I feel kind of dried down, and using data by yourself to figure out what to do next. I would give my 2012 self. So yeah, I feel like you want to say something.
No, I just love that.
Yeah.
No.
No, so I'm gonna just kind of plug from like the career development end, right? When we think about like job search, So I want folks to really think about, you know, come to TC next, make a coaching appointment, or associate director of coaching is sitting right there, go talk to her. But outside of kind of plugging that, right, it's really important to like what Brennan and Laura are both highlighting is the networking piece, right? Which is really intimidating, especially when you're thinking about being in a doctoral program for like 4 to 6 years, right? At what point do you start networking? Who do you network with? That was all very new to me. I had no idea how to do that, right? I was a first generation undergrad, grad, doctoral student, first generation working in a higher ed institution. So one of the things I say is talk to people that are close to you, right? Could be a faculty member, it could be a classmate, right? Could be somebody sitting in this room, right? And just start having those conversations. And what I tell folks is informational interviewing and networking goes both ways, right? It's not that you're just talking to someone and saying, hey, I want to, you know, network with you to get a job. It also goes on the other side. What can you also provide to that person as useful insight, right? Are you checking up on them, saying Happy New Year, right? Happy holidays if they celebrate something. If you know they have a kid, the kid's birthday is coming up, are you saying, oh my God, I remembered it was your kid's birthday, happy birthday, right? You have to make those human connections, which at times when you're in a new space, right? Coming to New York for the first time, you know, coming to a different country for the first time. Start going to office hours of your faculty members, right? Brennan mentioned going into Janice's office for this person. Is there an office that you pass by that are just really friendly to you, right? We all know that GSLD has like coffee and snacks for everybody. Are you all engaging with those folks in that office, talking to them about their professional journeys? Who do they know, right? And a lot of times networking is like this big, scary thing. It doesn't have to be scary, right? Start with your roommate. Start with people that you know, right? Start with anybody, just start talking to people, really build out your LinkedIn. Who's on LinkedIn? What are they posting about? And really keeping up to date in your industry and field is really important. Even if graduation is 6 years from now, a lot's gonna change between now and 6 years. Are you following those employment trends, right? If there's a recession, there's an economic downfall, do you know what's happening in your industry? We saw that with COVID a lot, right? A lot of jobs, right, were going hybrid. A lot of jobs are actually stopping. Right? People were not able to function remotely. How are those folks thinking about those transferable skills? Which brings me into my second question for you all is, how did you learn about the opportunities in your field that were not only academic and research? How about other things? How did you learn that? Where did you learn that from? Et cetera.
Do you mind if I start out? Because there's some threads that I think are nice connections. So definitely hang in there with me to answer that question. It's all gonna be confusing. So,
Okay.
So yeah, buckle up. Here we go. So to the point about networking, I don't think I've ever had an adult job that was through an interview. It was also all of my jobs, starting at TC at a full-time research position, and that was knocking on a professor's door and saying, "Hi, I read your book, and I really am interested in what your work is. Do you have any research opportunities?" That led to a very long, full-time collaboration with some beautiful people in the room. Second to that innovation fellowship I talked about that's the only job I applied. I had a graduate assistant job that led to a full-time job. So it's interesting. The other thing is that I didn't realize that the relationships I formed at TC with my colleagues, my buddies, my peers, my mentors, and now the mentorship is inverted. People that I just thought that I was building authentic relationships for, that's where networking and amazing, and again, that idea of like, what can we co-create together? And that's opened up opportunities, which goes into your question, which is things that I just thought I was just doing at TC, years later opened up opportunities. So if you can hang in there for a second on this journey. So one of the things I did at TC when I got my master's here as well, and when I was doing my master's, I did this human rights course down in Brazil. We looked at nonprofits, interesting, huh? That was people that were doing really interesting work in Brazil and having big impact. One of the organizations was a media. Anybody hear the movie City of God, which was from a long time ago? All the kids in that movie are actually from the communities. And so two of the people in that movie actually started a nonprofit to teach other young people how to make media. Well, on my journey with Teachers College down in Brazil, one of this person who started this nonprofit came up to New York and he wanted to meet. He said, "Hey, can you set something up at TC where I can talk about my work in Brazil?" So we did that, check, and I was just doing it because it was fun, I loved it. But he said, oh, also, can you introduce me to other youth media organizations in New York City? And I was like, okay, sure. So I didn't know this world at all, and I just went around and started calling people, and we went to these nonprofits, and that's 2008, I mean, I don't know, I can't remember. Fast forward, and now it's 2016. I did a postdoc in Brazil for a couple years after I graduated. I come back in 2016, I don't have a job, I'm kind of like, what am I gonna do now that I've grown up? I go to a conference, I go to an AERA conference, and I meet this guy who's one of the nonprofits that I went with my friend from Brazil, and we start talking at the AER conference. Long story short, that led to a full-time job. That's where I was a director of new media arts. It's a nonprofit where it teaches young people how to make documentaries and websites about social issues that are relevant to them. And so I did that so the point is, like, you see, we're networking, and then that's opened up other opportunities too. So while I was at that nonprofit, I started working with something called Hive NYC, which is like this collective of people that work with out of school time programs. It's a huge collective of how do you connect young people to different opportunities. It's called Hive. Fast forward the work with that, I'm now working with some colleagues there with the work I'm doing at CUNY. So the point is, I mean, if you look at my CV, it looks insane. Like, really, there is like, when I got interviewed at CUNY, the chair was like, can you walk me through this CV? Because it kind of doesn't make sense. And I was like, no, if you it's all connected, and it's often with networking, and this community is connected to this community. And so, yeah, I feel like networking is so important. And how did I find jobs outside of nonprofit? Or out of academia? It was networking. Is the short answer. So, yeah.
Ask me a question.
How did you learn about opportunities in your field that did not include the professoriate?
Okay, cool. So I knew when I got into my doctoral program that I was not going to be a traditional academic. I was not going to be a traditional professor. My advisor was super accepting of who I was, and like knew that, like, you know, Brennan, whatever you do is going to be great. So just do it. I'm not going to get in your way. I'm going to support you and move you forward the way in a positive trajectory. That being said, I'm someone who comes from a family that believes in having like just skill sets to make sure that you always have a job, right? It's important to just have like those skill sets or certain trades that will always make sure that you can provide for yourself and that you'll stay afloat. And so I kind of built two lanes for myself. And I used the relationships that I had at Teachers College to really almost kind of be like nurturing and upliftment relationships, not necessarily career connection relationships. And I'll get back to that. I have built a career that is really kind of centered around workforce development, learning and development, and really kind of like how to build and scale an organization. So really working at the intersection of corporate and philanthropy and startups, really kind of sitting in between those three things and scaling people's organizations in a magnificent way. The reason why is because I want to create spaces and places where we all can survive and thrive and be our full selves. And I think that it's really, really important in today's workforce, especially as we're increasingly becoming more diverse, to be as inclusive and as accepting, and to make sure that everyone has a good experience at work. We spend so much time in these offices or online, right? Who wants to be miserable, right? Like, who wants to be miserable? We all have a grandparent or an uncle or an auntie or a parent who had to work that job, who hated it just to put food on the table. Do we have to be the generation that's hate that job too? No, right? So I'm very passionate about that, right? And so really building that career was something that was really important to me. And I credit like being able to get that start here at this university to really kind of have that career. That being said, the nurturing piece, right? I also knew that I loved media, and I loved building platforms, and I loved having conversations with people. And I talked a little bit about like what my dissertation work was, but really kind of like was fascinated with what media was kind of evolving to, right? Like we had social media, we had all these different platforms with all these different conversations and all these different aspects of media we had never seen before. Also, I'm someone who loves movies. I'm someone who loves television. You talk about television and TV with me, I'm gonna be talking to you for an hour because I watch TV a lot. I've kept a running list of television shows that I've watched since 2020. We were all stuck in the house. I need something to do. I have over 50 shows a year, right? Like of just binging TV, right? So between me, movies and TV, I'm very passionate about it. But at the same time, I'm passionate about like making sure that whatever privileges that I have, that I've been able to kind of like build over the years, that I'm constantly giving back and I'm constantly making sure that I'm creating pathways and opportunity for other people. What I find in today's society is that we are almost kind of caught up in this mist of social media where people post on Instagram and post on TikTok that highlights the best parts of their lives, right? It's the biggest and brightest successes, but they don't talk about how they got there, right? They don't talk about the work that it took to kind of get there. And so what came of that was everyone at TC knew that I could facilitate a conversation. JC has Juan Carlos, excuse me. Janice, other professors across this college would say, Brennan, we want you to facilitate a panel for this. Brennan, we want you to facilitate a panel for that, right? And it became like, they're like, Brennan, you know, eventually you're like gonna turn into like this male Oprah. And I was like, okay, save the money. You know? But at the same time, it was, oh wow, like, maybe there's something to this. Maybe I can actually do this full time. Well, there's not a job that says, okay, male Oprah for 70K, you know, like you have to really kind of build it as you go, right? And so in 2020, I was sitting there twiddling my thumbs and I said, okay, what can I do from my apartment? Because I can't go outside. And being in New York, you meet a lot of diverse people that have a variety of different skill sets. And so what I challenge everyone in this room, if there's somebody who you do not know in this room, introduce yourself and say, who are you? What are your interests? What are you trying to do? Because that's what kind of built the community for me in New York of being able to meet all these different folks. And I met a guy who knew how to edit video. I met a guy who knew how to produce. And together we started to create this podcast, right? And it was something that was built off of the passion that was nurtured from the community, from this college, the professors, the admin that poured into me and said, Brennan, these conversations are important. These stories that you're trying to tell are important. The way in which you facilitate is good, right? I was someone who grew up and was bullied because I had a very, very light voice, right? They used to say I was Prince. They used to make a little noise when I walked down the hall. And I was very insecure about my voice because they say you sound like a girl. And I got really, really insecure about it. And being a 30-something-year-old man about to start a podcast, I was like, can I do this? Can my voice scare? Are they gonna talk bad about me online? But again, getting over that fear, leaning into what I know to be true and the nurturing that I was able to get provided from this community and my family, I was able to do that, right? And that was the beginning of my trajectory in doing this podcast and also the continuation of building my corporate career. Thank
you. So I'm gonna talk about 3 practical things that you all can kind of take home today from this, right? Again, as my career service hat. So the one thing, as we're kind of talking, is your adjunct lecturers, right? Folks forget to talk to them. They are people that work in the field, right? They're actually doing the work. Talk to them, right? Don't just talk to your full-time professors. Talk to all of your faculty. And I tell students all the time that like I teach a career counseling course. I do career counseling and career coaching in my full-time job, right? So it's not that I've never actually thought to be a full-time professor. I don't think I ever will. But talk to those folks, right? If you're like, I don't know who to turn to, or your faculty members, right? So and do not forget your adjunct lecturers. They are people that work in the field. My second practical advice is, y'all know that you have an office and a senior associate director that does employer events and career affairs, right? We have employers that come on campus, right? If you're like, wait, I don't even know about opportunities, who are people that hire TC students? We have so many employers, hundreds in every academic year that come engage with us. Are you all looking at those employers, right? That's something practical. You can come to a panel, you can leave one of those panels with somebody's contact information, right? That's number 2 practical advice. Third one's alumni. We have 90,000 plus alumni that came out of Just Teachers College. That's a lot of people, right? Go on LinkedIn, right? If you don't know how to use LinkedIn, that's okay. You have those resources on this campus to be able to help you navigate that, right? And we tell students this all the time. You have those like really practical things that you can do, right? If you don't know how to use LinkedIn, that's okay. Sometimes I don't know how to use LinkedIn. I'm the director of the office, right? Sometimes I go, help me. Come talk to us, right? And that way you can figure out where are the alumni from my program? Where are the alums that graduated with my degree program, right? Because sometimes when you walk in, you're like, I don't even know what to do, right? How do I learn about opportunities? You find out to see what are those alums doing, right? What are they out there working in? What industries and fields are they in? And how do I talk to these folks, right? Maybe they're connected to one of your professors on LinkedIn. Hey, Dr. So-and-so, I noticed that you're friends with Brennan on LinkedIn. Can you do an introduction for me? Right, very practical way to do it versus like just network, right? So one of my last questions before we move on to Q&A from the audience is, do you use your research topic in your everyday work? And if you don't, do you plan on using it? Is it helpful for you?
Do I use my research from the past in my everyday work?
Yeah, your dissertation research.
Dissertation.
Yeah.
Yes, and I would say more recently, yeah, so I have my research background, was on inequities in education, and so right now I'm working at CUNY, I'm an adjunct assistant professor at CUNY. So not necessarily my dissertation work, but my postdoc work and the work, all the stuff I did after graduating, immediately, like right now, so that was all on how is technology, like I said, fundamentally changing education. And I mentioned that networking and how that led to opportunities. Well, I teach, but I also am part of this research opportunity where we're helping pre-service teachers. What do they need to know about technology to prepare the next generation? Like how do we work with, through, and against technology? It's called Computing Integrated Teacher Education is the fancy name. And absolutely the research that I did in the past is very much interwoven and opened up opportunities. And I get to publish and I get to actually put it into practice. And it's really fun. It's really awesome. So the short answer is yes. Yes, I do. So, and I hope to get back down to Brazil to do more research entrepreneurship. Right.
Vacation. Go. Yeah, seriously. Okay, so I'm gonna try to tie this up in a really nice bow and make it make sense. So I hope it makes sense. Okay, so a couple of things. I knew I wasn't going to be a traditional academic, but I taught for 4 years during my doctoral program with a professor here named Dr. Ruiz. I taught her diversity and education course with her for 4 years. I taught the course by myself a couple of times. I also had the privilege to teach African American studies to the freshmen over at Columbia. And what that provided me was with a skill set to not only be able to facilitate, but also how to instruct and also how to educate, right? Even though people are not might necessarily be in a traditional classroom, everyone needs to constantly learn and they need to be able to be communicated in a way that works for them. And so as a teacher, as an educator, you have to meet your students where they are, right? And not everyone learns the same way. Not everyone needs to be spoken to the same way. Office hours are going to be different with each student. And so what that has provided me is with a multifaceted skill set of communication to be able to work with a variety of different people from a variety of different places and be able to meet them where they are and make sure that they achieve whatever it is that they need to, right? That's one thing. Next thing, my dissertation was called Making Room, Creating Space for Black Boys to Tell Their Own Stories, right? And so my focus was 100% using my dissertation to be a platform for these Black kids to be able to tell their own stories in the ways in which they needed to be able to tell their stories, right? At the same time, that also gave me the opportunity to really know how to build a platform, whatever a platform may be. And so when I was creating my podcast, it was, okay, what's this target audience going to look like? Who are we trying to talk to? What stories are we trying to tell? Who do we want to have on the podcast, right? And so there was this like really strange year called 2020. And again, we were all stuck in the house. And we were working on this podcast with the intention of saying like, okay, we just want to talk about some things. We want to like have some conversations. And we dropped the podcast with 3 episodes on the week or the day after George Floyd's murder. And I didn't even hear about George Floyd until later that week, right? And all of a sudden, my producer called me and says, Brennan, we're getting this surge of like listeners. I don't know what's going on. Like, are you promoting it somewhere? Are you doing something? I don't know. Like, I don't know what's happening. But literally, we went from 0 to like a magnificent number, and not even having to pay for advertisement, and not even have, because people were hungry for storytelling, right? And so what I mean by that is sometimes you're going to be doing a lot of different things in your doctoral journey if you choose to do a doctoral degree. And it might not necessarily make sense to you. It might not necessarily make sense to everybody else. But I promise you, if you keep going and you stick to what you know, you will meet the moment. And that moment is your moment to apply everything that you work towards to really kind of soaring. Another example of that is when I graduated from TC, my first job outside of my doctoral program was working at Echoing Green. Echoing Green is a global social impact fund that invests in early stage entrepreneurs. And I was having a conversation with Janice. And I said, Janice, what am I gonna do? Like, what job is going to like work for me? And she said, Brennan, look for what you like. Look for what you like. And I said, okay. And I said, well, I did a Ph.D. in this, and I did a dissertation on this topic. Let me just type in Google Black boys in LinkedIn. I typed in LinkedIn, I said Black boys. And all of a sudden, there was one role that came up. And it was at Echoing Green, and it was a portfolio manager for the Black Male Achievement Fellowship, the fellowship that invests in organizations that were focused on advancing Black men and boys. I got the job, right? And so you're like, how the heck does this happen? But again, doing the work, not necessarily having a clear idea about the destination, but knowing that what you're doing is passionate to you, and knowing that the opportunity will present itself at the same time when it's supposed to present itself. Now we are in our 6th season of the podcast. We just completed our 6th season of the podcast. We have over 2 million listeners. Okay, we have started in 2021 a Black History Month fund. We were able to raise thousands of dollars for Black-led organizations that were focused on education. We were able to partner with Pharrell, and he provided us an X amount of money to do our podcast and to support entrepreneurs. We have had live events, and we are planning for our 7th season. We did our first short film last fall, and the platform just continues to grow, right? And do I know where we're going to land, or what's it going to look like, or how it's going to be? No, but I'm doing the work and staying true to myself. And so the last thing I'll say, and then I'll pass it back to you, is no matter what you do, stay true to yourself. As long as you are positively influencing the world in the way in which you know to be true, stay true to that, because I promise you, it might just be a random moment like 2020 that just happens, and you say, I've got this. I know what to do. I know the direction. I'm going to meet this moment. I'm going to soar, I'm going to scale, and I'm going to fly. And the rest is history. So that's it.
I don't know how to follow that.
Like, the things that you're saying, like the LinkedIn search is real. Like, I'm just like,
Right.
keep changing that thing over and over again. I'm like, what is new now?
Keep up to date. So before I ask the audience if you all have any questions, I will say that I don't want anyone to feel pressure that you have to continue your research after you graduate, right? I did take a little bit of a break because my brain needed to breathe, but I turned into a researcher. If you asked like undergrad and master's level Sabeen, I would have been like, I'm never gonna do research, right? And then when I told my master's advisor, hey, I'm gonna do a doctoral program, he was like, he used to laugh and say, you're never gonna do research. And now, like my coworkers know this, I go, so what's the data behind that? Let's let's look at the trends in our data, right? You become a researcher and you come at it from like a data. Although I was a qualitative researcher, I will say this, my entire dissertation was a case study. But you will use parts of it. There's so many skills that you learn that you're going to take with you on your journeys and kind of in your life. So don't think, well, I have to now do research because I went through a doctoral program. You can be a practitioner and do practical things as well, and it's just as important. Okay, so we have roughly 10 minutes. Does anybody have questions? Because I have more questions.
Thank you so much. I'm in my 7th year of my doctorate, and I think I got 3 years worth of inspiration just in the last 45 minutes. So you've all kind of mentioned in different ways you're great mentors, the different mentors that have led you. Do you have any suggestions if let's say you had a mentor who just assumed you wanted to be a professor, like that was their goal for you? And do you have any suggestions about how to kind of like Brennan was just saying, like, this is what's right for me, this is my life, and I have to stay true to myself, but you want to preserve that relationship? Like linking back to your networking topic?
One of the things that I will say is folks sometimes feel pressured that like their dissertation advisor or their academic advisor has to be their mentor, right? Mentors come from a lot of different places, a lot of different spaces. I love my dissertation chair, amazing human, but she wasn't my mentor, right? There was somebody else that I had to like fight to be on my committee that was my mentor. I had folks outside of my program that were my mentors, right? So you don't have to go and ask for advice for every person that wants to give you it. You can say, thank you so much, I'm gonna take that into consideration and be polite about it. You don't have to be rude about it. But that would be my mentors come in all different shapes and sizes. They come from all different places in life. You just have to find your people, and that's really important. I will say that I defended my research topic my first week on the job here, and my coworkers and my staff had like sparkling cider for me, and I was like, I just met you all, right? But that was a community that I found here, right? So it's a misconception that I hear a lot, and I actually get a lot of doctoral students that talk to me, how do I fix my relationship with my dissertation chair? And it's like, you're putting a lot of pressure on that relationship, right? That person doesn't have to be your mentor, right? They can help you be your chair, advise you on your research, but that mentorship can come from anybody else too. You have to find your people. And I think that sometimes is the hard part of it, right? You can take their advice if they're giving it, right? Sometimes it's unsolicited advice. You take it and you say, thank you. I'll take that into consideration, right? So that would be my 2 cents. I don't know if you all want to add anything.
So thank you for the very authentic, tough questions. There was interesting power dynamics and yeah, that it's real. Let's see, I have 2 different suggestions that are very different. One is if you feel like you're not getting what you need, I mean, I don't know how far along, well, you said 7 years. I switched like pretty far in. I switched my, who was on my committee, because it just was not working with one of the professors. We're still buddies, we're Facebook friends, but I had to switch because it just was not working. I have another friend who it was different. It was an abuse. It was not working at all, and it was abusive. That does not sound like your situation, but yeah, I was like, find someone else, and she graduated, but it was like kind of starting. So sometimes switching up, if something's not working, switching up. In this case, I love what you said, and I love what you said, Brennan, about thinking about what do you get from different mentors. So yes, kind of a yes and attitude of like, yes, that's great, and I'm interested in this. Who can I talk to that I can also, so instead of resisting, saying yes and, who else can I talk to that might be able to advise me about X? And then that way that person doesn't feel rejected or feel like, because they have an agenda, they want you probably to follow it, you know? So yes and is my improv advice.
So the one thing that I heard you say was, how do I preserve this relationship, right? And I felt that because I'm like, oh man, like how do you do both, right? How do you kind of be who you want to be, but then also make sure this person is still going to support you, be proud of you, you know, all of those things. What I would say is kind of building off of both of what they both said. I mean, honestly, you really have to diversify your portfolio of what you need, right? And then also you've been here for 7 years. So you know this person, right? You know what they can handle and what they can't handle. And if they need to just know that you're going to move in this trajectory, what they don't know won't hurt them, right? Because everyone changes it up, right? Everyone changes it up. I know we feel compelled sometimes to say like, I'm doing this and I'm, you know, sometimes you can give someone life-size helpings and they only have like a small palette for what you're providing, right? And if that's the case, then that's when you have to look at other people who can support and be with. I had, on my committee, I had 2 professors who are my committee from English education. I had one professor who was in higher education, I had another professor who was in science education, I had another professor who was at the law school, right? And it was because I needed that variety of perspectives. I'm sitting here studying law and policy. I can't ask my English ed professor to support me in that specific trajectory, right? But I also don't need to go to my English ed professor and say, hey, so you can't give me this. And I wanna lean into this full throttle. It's like, no, hey, I'll see you at the committee hearing, like, okay, cool, great, thanks so much, right? And so I think that you just have to kind of take the leadership of your own work and your own trajectory and say, this is how I'm moving and this is how you play a part in my experience. But that doesn't mean that I need you to be completely understanding or completely aligned. It's just, this is the position that you play in this game, right now. So that's how it is.
All right. Anybody else have any questions? It's okay, you can talk to individual people, okay.
Alright,
Hi, thank you. So I'm a incoming master's student. The challenge that I have is to narrow down my interests because I'm interested in so many things and I'm considering a PhD path, which I'm not even sure about, but you know, when you mentioned about there's an expert in every subject. Like, what, maybe there's an area I want to be an expert about and write about so that it gives me credibility to create something for a community, right? And so, like, there's so many opportunities here at Columbia, people, events. I mean, it's like deep as the ocean. It's so overwhelming. And I have limited time. And so like, what would you suggest in narrowing down or synthesizing or making sense of all these interests so that you could focus in and zero in on that? Otherwise, you just spread yourself out so thin and you're like everywhere and then end up nowhere, right? So what would you suggest for that?
So I love this question too. So I used to consider myself, when I was a kid, it was like, Brennan, you're so scatterbrained. You're just like, you want to do everything. You're all over the place, whatever. And I was like, that's actually a really great thing, right? It's a really great thing because that means I'm constantly thinking. That means I'm constantly exploring and I have a variety of different interests. And that begins to become a skill set that you can master a lot of different things, but you can't master them all at once. And so what has worked for me, your master's program is gonna be 2 years? 2 years?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something, okay, something like that. So what I would say to you is I will compartmentalize your interests, right? And say, okay, I'm fascinated in these 4 subjects. I'm fascinated in law, I'm fascinated in higher education, I'm fascinated in science education and English education. These are all 4 that I'm interested in, right? And for 2 months, I'm gonna hyper focus on this specific subject. The next 2 months, I'm gonna hyper focus on this specific subject. And that's how I kind of did it, because trying to do it all at once was too much for me. But what I found is that as I kept on trying, exploring these different subjects, I would say, okay, like it's been 2 weeks of me trying science education, this is not for me, right? But as I was exploring this side of the fence, it was, oh, this is actually really, this, I'm gonna stick with this. I'm gonna really become an expert in this and lean in as much as possible, right? So that way, it doesn't say like, you don't have to spread yourself so thin in doing 10 things at one time. Because what happens is you have 100%, right? And you're giving 20% here, 30% here, 40% here, 10% here, 5% here. And eventually you're like, well, I'm not good at anything. I don't like anything. I have no interest in anything because I'm not able to give my all in one thing. Master one thing, decide whether or not it's going to be one subject or one specific focal point. and see if that is it for you. If it's not, then continue on. That's the great thing about being a master's student, because it really is an incubator, right? Think of your master's as an incubator for your success and for you to be able to really try on different clothes that work specifically for you and see what happens.
And I know we're almost at time, so I have to say that your question is equally helpful to me as it is to you, because it sounds like we were talking earlier, and I think it's a really common, I experienced the exact same thing you're describing. So I don't think it's an abnormal, so just knowing like, great, this excitement is awesome, actually. And I think I'm just gonna plus one everything you said. And two, I literally, I think just this year, I had the exact same experience as you. I started at TC, my first master's in 2000 and graduated. And I had that exact same experience. And literally, I think just this year, I was like, I'm mindful that I know I can handle this subject or this much time. This is like my optimal amount that I can focus on X. And then I kind of shut down. And so that, I guess, just being mindful too, building off of what you said, is kind of tapping into when you know you're starting to get exhausted or overwhelmed because there's so many options, breathe, know it's all gonna work out, and exploration is fun and exciting. Yeah.
And I think another challenge is when to listen to your heart over your brain. Especially now, there's like research from the Heart Math Institute that the heart receives intuition and information before the brain does, that it can be considered like a second brain. So there's that part as well. It's like when am I logical in making a decision, and when do I follow my heart? The heart consciousness part, the post-material science aspect of heart, like electromagnetic fields. So that's also another challenge. If the two things weigh the same, how do I make a decision off of what my body's telling me? Right? Because your podcast is on stories. And I was just talking to her today about the poet Ocean Vuong made a statement that our body carries stories, and each time we tell a story, and the stories get edited, the stories in our body get edited each time we tell it. And so it's like, how does that play a role in this decision making?
So I'll try to that's a really good question, and I'm not going to give you the answer it deserves, but I'm going to try my best. So the way in which I've always had to move is both with logic and feeling, right? And I had to move with them together and collectively, and strategically. The logical side of me says, boy, you have to have a job. You got to pay your bills. You got to pay the rent. You know what I mean? You got to do loans. You got to make sure you have something, right? You got to have something, right? The feeling part of me is like, I'm so passionate about this, and I know it's going to make a positive impact. And I know that even though I'm not getting paid for this, that there's going to be something magnificent that comes out of it, right? And so trying your best to balance both, I think, in today's world and society is key. Is it easy? No. Is it something that should be, merged together? Probably. But at the end of the day, I say start with both using your logic and your feeling. Don't try to dissuade the other. Don't try to, push the other one away. Just try to manage both as much as you possibly can and see what leads the way, And so that's the best answer that I can have for you in this moment. But I think the question is great. Okay, cool.
Can we get a round of applause for a wonderful. So before I formally bring this to a close, our panel will hang out. So sometimes folks are not comfortable in asking questions in a group setting, and you want a one-on-one. So I'm volunteering them to hang out, have some cookies, and have one-on-one discussions and some of these deeper conversations. So again, I want to thank you. First of all, I want to thank you also, give yourselves a round of applause for being here. As part of, there's a couple of things that I heard a lot in terms of takeaway. One is, this is your journey. So whatever you decide, it's your journey. You own it. You build towards that goal, and the ultimate decisions will be up to you. And what the outcomes will be depending on the work that you do. Another thing that I heard a lot was mentorship and networking, and that to me is community. That's what we're trying to build with these kinds of programs. That's what we're trying to build here at TC. So we encourage you to continue to engage with our office and engage in these programs. You will grow, you will learn, and you will build. And then there was something else, but it escaped me. So I'll move on to it's just happened, I'm getting old. I'll move on to really closing. Well, before formally closing, I want to take a moment and thank everyone who played a role in this. So building these programs is a lot of behind the scenes administrative work that happens, and everything happens in community and a partnership. So first and foremost, I want to thank the Office of Graduate Student Life and Development, NALG, Fanny, for always being a partner and helping us lead this work. I want to thank my colleagues, Janelle Torres and Karen Hammett, who are here as well, part of the office, and we all do this in collaboration. And last but not least, I would want to thank our esteemed panel again. And it did come back to me because I am getting old. The other part was networking and mentorship, but also in the sense of both Brennan and Laura mentioned the relationship that we've had within TC and outside of TC and how things sort of reverse and mentorship ends up being two ways. This is very much that. So I want to thank you both for bringing your experiences back to TC, for sharing and being so candid and open with our communities, with our students, but also for being proud TC alums and being able to give back. Paying it forward is important. So thank you both for that. And last but not least, my colleague Sabeen in the Student Affairs Division, TC Next, for volunteering, one, to share her story, and two, for continuing to plug the awesome programs that TC Next is offering. So take advantage of that. I encourage you to approach Sabeen after and see what the office has to offer. But with that, I bring this to a close. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the cookies. Take some to go.